Welcome to the Warverse. Subscribe to hear more stories. Cold. You call this cold? Lieutenant Marcus Draven chuckled, his breath forming a cloud of mist that drifted like a ghost in the frozen air. His alien companions stared at him in disbelief, their bodies trembling inside thermal suits that buzzed desperately to keep them alive. For them, the climate of this icy moon was a death sentence, but for Draven, a human born on one of the galaxy's harshest worlds, it was nothing more than a mild inconvenience. "How are you not freezing?" hissed Sholok, his scaly skin pale beneath his protective visor. The Cenari warrior's gaze flickered nervously between Draven and the endless white horizon. A brutal wind howled through the group, forcing the aliens to huddle closer, while Draven simply shrugged, trudging forward with calm indifference as the crunch of snow echoed beneath his boots. "We call this sweater weather," he said casually, earning shocked glances from the alien cadets. They were recruits from several species, dragged into a survival exercise on Vast 9, a planet infamous for sub-zero temperatures and violent snowstorms. It was a standard drill at the Galactic Military Academy, designed to test the endurance of every species, but for most it had already become a desperate fight to survive. "You're seriously not using a coat?" croaked Hexa, a feathered Bakar struggling beneath layers of padded gear. His feathers puffed in vain to trap heat, yet his body still shook uncontrollably. "If our suits last another hour, we'll be lucky." "Dead serious," Draven replied flatly, his face untouched by the agony etched across theirs. His cheeks were only faintly red, his breathing steady, his stride relaxed. "Humans were built for this. You should see the winters back on Earth, now those are brutal." Hexa blinked slowly, his enormous eyes fighting to stay open in the numbing cold. "Why haven't your limbs frozen solid yet?" "Frozen? Why would they?" Draven tilted his head, genuinely puzzled. The cadets exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether he was joking or had lost his mind. Everyone had heard the rumors about humans, creatures from so-called death worlds, places so hostile that survival seemed impossible. But hearing stories was one thing, watching it firsthand was something else entirely. Draven stood tall and calm, as if strolling through a temperate garden, while the others fought for every breath. "This doesn't make sense," snapped Rallic, a reptilian cadet with razor-edged jaws. "My species was engineered to withstand extreme heat, and even with advanced tech I can barely move in this nightmare." "But you, look around," Draven interrupted, pointing toward the glittering ice peaks in the distance. "This might be torture for you, but for us humans have endured worse for millennia. Ice ages, blizzards, entire winters below freezing. You adapt, you push through, you learn to stay warm any way you can. It's that simple." Another wave of icy wind slammed into the group, driving the aliens back a step, yet Draven remained rooted, unmoved. "Adapt?" Hexa asked, his voice trembling. "How can anyone adapt to this?" "It's simple," Draven grinned. "Layers of clothing, good circulation, and a little stubbornness. Back on Earth, whole populations live in climates like this year-round. It's not comfortable, but it's manageable if you're prepared." "But you're not prepared," Hexa argued, his beak tightening, his eyes wide. "You're using the same standard issue gear we are." Draven laughed quietly, glancing down at his basic survival pack. Compared to their high-tech thermal rigs, his gear looked like scraps. "True, but I come from a death world, remember? Earth has a few nasty surprises, and the cold is just one of them." In the distance, shimmering faintly through the pale light, stood the outline of an old research station. "There it is," Draven said calmly. "Once we get inside, we can warm up." "You're sure it's still standing?" Hexa asked, his trembling voice nearly lost in the storm. His legs wobbled under him, feathers once iridescent now dull and lifeless in the brutal cold. Draven nodded with absolute confidence. "It's there, don't worry, just stay close to me." Gorik, the largest of the group, let out a low growl as he forced his massive frame through the snow. Frost clung to his thick fur, every step a battle against exhaustion. "You call this nothing," he rumbled, his voice heavy with strain. Draven glanced at him, saw the giant's knees nearly buckling, and smiled faintly. "Everything is relative, my friend. Sure, it's cold, but it's all about perspective." He gave a soft laugh before continuing. "I've seen winters back on Earth where entire cities vanished under snow, where breathing itself felt like a struggle. Compared to that, this is just a brisk day." Hexa let out a weak laugh that sounded more like a cough. Unbelievable, how could anyone live in a place like that? Survival, Draven answered simply. You adapt over time, you build shelter, make fire, and when those fail, you build the will to endure. Sholok stumbled, his vision blurred. I can barely move, every muscle locked up, one step at a time, Draven advised, his voice steady, almost comforting. Reach the station, that's all that matters today. The Scenary's jaws chattered violently as he struggled forward, but something in Draven's calm presence seemed to push him onward. If the human could stride through the blizzard as though it were nothing, then surely he could try a little harder. The wind screamed louder, biting at exposed flesh and rattling their suits. Snow swirled thickly, reducing visibility to almost nothing. Draven stopped, eyes narrowing as he studied the white void ahead. The storm's getting worse, we need to move faster. Hexa staggered, dragging his wings through the snow. I don't think I can make it much farther. Yes, you can, Draven said sharply, rushing to his side and pulling him upright. It's your mind playing tricks on you. You're stronger than you realize. One step, then another. That's all it takes. Gorik growled impatiently, his breath steaming in the freezing air. Why don't you feel it? You barely even look cold. Draven smirked, though his eyes stayed fixed on the path ahead. Oh, I feel it. I've just learned to ignore it. That's the trick, you don't focus on the cold. Thinking about it only makes it worse. Sholok tripped and nearly collapsed into the snow, but Draven caught him by the arm. Careful, he said firmly, hauling the Scenary back to his feet. Just a little farther, we're almost there. I can't, Sholok gasped, terror flashing in his wide eyes. My legs, they've stopped working. Don't listen to your body, Draven replied, gripping his arm tighter. Your legs still work, I'll help if I have to. But you will keep moving. The group trudged on, step by step, the incline of the hill rising before them. Their advanced suits sputtered under the relentless cold, and even mighty Gorik began to stumble. But Draven kept steady, his calm presence guiding them like a beacon. At last, he pointed toward the slope ahead. There, just over that ridge. The station's right behind it. Through the blinding snow, Sholok squinted. He could barely make out the faint silhouette of a structure, but it was there. We'll actually make it, of course, Draven answered with an easy smile. We've got each other, that's all we need. A ragged laugh escaped Hexa's beak, quickly turning into a cough. You're insane, maybe, Draven admitted with a shrug. But I've survived worse, and so will you, Gorik groaned, muscles burning as he dragged himself forward. If we survive this, I'll never doubt a human again. Draven gave a short laugh. Fair enough, now let's move before you all turn into ice sculptures. They climbed steadily, the hill their final obstacle. The storm howled with fury, but the promise of warmth and the unshakable confidence of Draven pushed them forward. At the crest, the wind cut like knives, nearly knocking them off balance. Draven stopped, pointing down. There it is, our way out of this mess. Just a little farther, and you'll rest easy. Sholok forced a laugh through chattering teeth. Humans, you're something else. Draven smirked. You're only just realizing that now. Together, half stumbling and half sliding, they descended toward the dark outline below. The station was small, barely visible through the flurries, but it was real, a shelter. Draven reached it first, brushing snow from the access panel with his gloved hand. Hold on, he murmured, punching in the emergency code. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a hiss, the heavy door slid open, revealing the dim interior of the outpost. The door of the research station sealed shut with a heavy clang, and at once a wave of warm air spilled into the entry chamber, a shocking contrast to the icy winds howling outside. Inside, quickly, Draven ordered, guiding Hexa through the doorway first. Sholok and Gorik stumbled in behind him, collapsing to the floor the moment they crossed the threshold. Draven was the last to enter. He closed the door with a firm, satisfying click, and suddenly the storm's roar was cut off, replaced by nothing but the sound of ragged breathing. For a few long minutes, no one spoke. The sudden warmth felt overwhelming, and the alien cadets could hardly process the shift, from the edge of death in the frozen wasteland to the relative safety of the station's interior. Gorik leaned heavily against the wall, steam rising from his thick fur as the ice melted away. He let out a long, guttural sigh. "We actually made it," he murmured, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Across from him, Sholok slumped with his back to the wall, jaw still trembling violently. "How are we still alive?" he whispered. Hexa lay flat on the floor, a weak laugh escaping his beak. "Because we had a human with us." Draven, standing calmly near the control panel, pulled off his outer layers with practiced ease. He gave a small smile. "You didn't do so badly yourselves," he said, glancing at Sholok. "You held on longer than most would." Sholok stared at him with wide eyes, still shivering. "You call that holding on?" Draven shrugged. "You didn't quit. That's more than many can claim." Hexa forced himself to sit up, his chest rising and falling in sharp breaths. "I don't understand. I've studied human biology, read countless reports. But seeing it isn't the same. How can you treat that storm, that cold, as if it were nothing more than a nuisance?" Draven leaned back against the wall, folding his arms across his chest. "Like I said, we've dealt with this for a long time. Cold, heat, hunger, fatigue, we've lived through all of it. You adapt, you learn to face it. It's in our blood." Sholok's teeth clenched as he thought back. "You weren't just surviving out there. You were guiding us, pushing us forward even when we were ready to collapse." "That isn't normal," Draven laughed softly. "Not for you, maybe. But for humans, that's what we do. We survive, we push on, giving up is not an option." Borat grunted in approval, shaking his massive head. "I used to think humans were overrated, that all the reports about your toughness were exaggerated." Draven smirked. "You wouldn't be the first to think that." The group sat quietly for a time, letting the warmth seep into their frozen limbs. Color slowly returned to their faces, and the numbness in their hands and feet began to fade. Outside, the storm continued to rage, battering the station walls, but inside there was safety and silence. It was Hexa who finally broke it, his tone calm but thoughtful. "I think I understand now, Lieutenant Draven, why your people are called Death Rulers." Draven's smile lingered, though he gave no immediate answer. Hexa's words were true. Earth wasn't called a death world simply for its brutal environment, it was because that environment had forged survivors. Humans who could endure anything, and come out stronger. Sholok nodded slowly, still leaning against the wall. "I think we all learned something today." Draven chuckled lightly. "Well, I'm glad this little survival exercise taught you something. But next time, let's pick a warmer planet." "Agreed." The alien cadets groaned in unison, but there was laughter hidden in their complaints. The tension that had nearly broken them in the storm finally began to dissolve, replaced by the shared triumph of survival. Outside, the blizzard screamed against the walls, relentless and wild. But inside, the group knew they had overcome something far greater than cold. They had faced the impossible and survived, not because of advanced suits or technology, but because a human had led them through. And in that moment, they understood what it truly meant to be human. It was a lesson they would carry with them for the rest of their lives.